Okay, we're here now for the next sort of 30 minutes to talk about risk. And I, for one, am going to be fascinated by this because I used to be responsible for this area and had lots of good people, but I saw it year after year getting harder and harder, and I don't think it was ever solved. And all the firms that I work with, I don't know anybody who is happy with it, anybody who can get the level of engagement from it. So anything Intapp are doing to improve this is just music to my ears. We've got Amasis and Daragh who are going to now take us through some of the work that you've been doing and some of what Intapp are doing to sort of help the market with this. So over to you guys.
Hi, my name's Amasis Saba. I thought it'd be useful for us to have a quick chat about some of the things we've seen as challenges, and I will change my tone of my chat slightly to, as we have a lot of IT professionals, how you can go back and be absolute heroes for your risk and compliance functions, or stop them complaining to you. Either way, you come out ahead. The biggest challenge I think we face with business acceptance, and it's a real challenge for me, it'll always be open, but I'm going to try it. It's one place for risk and compliance. It's a bit like this. It is completely unnatural in so many ways because it is trying to be many things with many competing objectives. So you've got the fact that you want the minimum number of questions possible, but at the same time you want to be able to run detailed business analysis from it. You want it to be as easy and simple for IT to maintain, but you want it to be fully integrated to all the external systems and being updated in real time from all of them. You want it seamless. You want it to consider the end-to-end matter lifecycle, from pitch to matter closing and all the data that you want out of it, but that's got to be run by multiple different departments, none of whom are responsible for the entire bit. You want all the information that's in the partner's head, either through the use of force, and that's the Jedi Force or a stick, you decide which one, but you want to try and do it without involving the matter partners because they are far too busy. Admin is not the best use of their time. In many ways, the system is, your business acceptance system is often the originator, and if you have a matter management element to it, it's the editor for much of the firm's data, but it is very rarely considered the system of record. And most in the risk and compliance don't want it to be considered the system of record. That's what the practice management system is for. But then you've got to work out the data that's flowing between them. And these are some of the challenges that you face because you're never going to please all of the people all of the time. Now, for those of us in risk and compliance, we know that. Nobody joins risk and compliance to be popular. IT is great. You're delivering services, you're giving things that people really want. No, that's not why you do risk and compliance. I don't know why you do it in risk compliance. It's a separate challenge. I've been doing Intapp Fun in terms of business acceptance since 2014. So back when was when we launched. We really started the journey at BCLP in about 2012 when Kay, for those of you who remember her, showed us what open might look like through the use of crayons and pictures. We took one of those leaps of faith, and it's been fantastic. So we've had the chance to do a few iterations of it in different places. And if we look at the future of what ideal might look like, some of the things that are useful to think about. Don't have one ring or one form to rule them all. Often, especially if it's your first gig with open, or you're going through the first few iterations, there is a desire to pour questions in there. We want it to ask everything. But actually think about whether or not it is the right place to ask them. So you want to ask the right questions of the right people at the right time. And day one, when the partner just wants to know, am I wasting my time starting to act on this, is not the time to ask the marketing questions, in my opinion. Because they don't know and they don't care and they don't want to be slowing down that business acceptance function to enter that. And definitely the PA doesn't know, and only has a limited window to go and ask those questions, and that's not one of the ones that gets asked. But it is still valuable data, and we'll come back to how we can possibly look and explore that. The other is, as we move towards what Nirvana might look like, is to consider some of the client-facing elements that Open Now might offer. So you can have an external-facing piece of Open. Where that's going to become, I think, increasingly important is, especially in some of our continental cousins on their data protection requirements, the idea that you ask them to email you documents is increasingly becoming unattractive. And in fact, it was one of the few ways we really got the Americans on board with some of the ID requirements relating to personal ID and passports was, don't worry, we will come up with a secure solution for you. And then we had to go, Intapp, come up with a secure solution for us. And there are some, so we can find ways to do that without having to go back to secure matters, secure file transfers. But these are ones that can help make things a little bit more seamless. We're not there. This is a nice idea that we want to be exploring, but I think this is something that will really start to help and really start to be an issue for personal data especially. You do gather so much information as part of your file opening, and you can really use it for some of the anti-money laundering, the client due diligence, the ongoing monitoring and the risk assessment tools. And there are some easy wins and some much harder wins. You can go for a fully automated risk scoring engine, and Intapp can help with a lot of that. But in terms of the ongoing monitoring piece, there are some quick wins that IT can definitely help with. So how often do you remind partners when your file is still open? So it's easy to do the part where you automate the closure process, but just reminding them your file's open. This was the matter description you gave us. These were the parties you gave us. And from that point on, you can be as smart and as complex as you want. You want to say, this was the DAC6 information that you gave us. This was the security settings you chose for it. So we send out that helpful reminder 1 month after the file is open, and every 6 months your file remains open. And it ticks a few different boxes. One is as a data prompt, because we live and die by the data that we have in our system. So if there are new parties or there have been scope creep and I've not beaten people over the stick to say, hey, come and give me the update, this is the way we can help them at least prompt to do it. And it then has a link to the matter maintenance module we've built to do some of that. It also then helps with your ongoing monitoring, so being able to evidence that your fee earners have considered the risk associated with the matter, because we put the risk details in that email as well. Too much information, it gets too boring and they don't read it, but it is a useful way to be able to evidence you're doing some of the effort for them, or at least taking them to water. So on that, you've got data everywhere. How you use it is the part that really makes a difference. And this is where I think the integration piece, and I'm looking forward to hearing more on the data and the collaboration piece. We only want to enter it once. I can't tell a partner, okay, I want you to enter it in the CRM system, and I want you to do a pitch, and I want you to come and do a conflict, and I want you to re-enter the data you already entered before, and then I want you to go to Foundation and put more information in, but start that from scratch again. So this all has to be really nice and seamless. And that does mean that you need to consider where your source of truth is and the data flows from it. So if you decide Elite is your source of truth, but Open, for example, does your editing for it, so your matter maintenance, you need to be conscious of the controls that you need to put in place to stop people editing it in other places. That is not without challenge, because suddenly everybody's very precious about the editing, but nobody wants to actually own the data. And I think that's another part that's really important in terms of identifying sector information, industry codes. Often Open and your business acceptance team are the conduit through which the data flows, but they don't own it. That's not theirs to own. That might be marketing, or it might be finance. Who the client groups are. So recognizing who is responsible for making sure that's accurate, because unless you do, everybody assumes everybody else is doing it. We're at Freshfields, we're absolutely confident that's okay, because I'm sure pricing is looking after who's in the client groups. And pricing was saying, no, it's in the open form and therefore it's yours. And we had to help educate that we are the conduits for this. We are not the owners of the data. And that blew some people's minds. But I think is a really important part to make sure there is clarity on, and that will really help. The last one I've got is make your life easier. The amount of processes that we find, and I don't want to say it's often in the finance group where there are very manual processes, either because Elite can be such a to automate, or because they're often the ones with the least resources. But there is so much that can be automated that saves somebody receiving an email and having to retype things. That always breaks my heart when in this day and age we're still doing that, instead of, well, we have the information, we know what needs to happen, so let's just automate that and make those happen with the right controls. Those were some of the things that I found a bit useful to think of. I'd be very interested to hear from you the challenges you're facing or the grief you get from your business acceptance teams and how you currently make their lives as easy as possible, because they're lovely people, most of them. So happy to take any questions.
We're talking about the connected firm. What do you see as a connected firm from a risk and compliance perspective?
I want it to work smoother. I want the data to be more closely managed, and I think the data is often the bigger, it's unsurprisingly, the connectivity is the flow of data most often. So getting it in from somewhere and pushing it out somewhere. And as with any system, if you put rubbish in, you're going to get rubbish out. And so often there is an assumption that it must be right because somebody's putting it in. And either you've got somebody who needs to be checking the data or be responsible for it. But one way you could help with that is don't ask people questions they don't need to be filling in. So we took out client address from the form. Why am I asking the business the client address? If I've got the client name and I know what country it is, the team is going to do client due diligence, they should be able to work out the client address. Same with the client industry. Don't ask the average secretary that, because it will not go well. So anything where the business acceptance team is going to check it, don't ask them. Just make people's lives easier. And that's one fewer question on the form. But anything that you are going to ask them that matters to the firm, somebody somewhere should be checking in some capacity.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you look at the interplay between the lawyer, the PA, the risk team, finance, operations, all of those people and other groups, BD, they'll all be involved in that client matter inception process. Again, had that interplay, the workflow that underpins that, who does what in the data collection. So what would you say around that?
So my first open design back in the day, we did very much as a benevolent dictatorship. So we didn't invite anybody else. And that worked so smoothly. But for some of the more recent ones, we have been much more interactive and we have involved people more. And it's been less on the business acceptance side, but more on the follow-on processes. So you act for client A, and about normally this point in the month, they realise, oh, well, actually, all that work we've done was actually for somebody slightly different, especially because that's who we want to bill now. And that's a whole process. And normally that process is because a poor biller somewhere has been shouted at. And then they have to find a way to go all the way back to the beginning of the business acceptance process. Well, what probably took you a week, they now need to do in 24 hours because it's year end, month end, quarter end. So those are the ones where if you can bring finance into the open environment, which will be scary for a lot of people, but you can automate so many of those very manual processes. Okay, we need to identify them. We have a process that does half of that already. So you can hook them back in and even have them use the open system with their own flow for it. Those are ways in which you can definitely bring people on board with that. If you do your pictures through your CRM system, finding a way that you can link the CRM system to open. So, hey, I've got a pitch number. If I enter the pitch number, I should be able to pull the information from the CRM system so I'm not repeating it. Now, there's a bit of a fight that will normally happen there as to where should pitches be run and started from. So everybody wants to own it until it comes to paying for the people to run it. So if we had to have enough business acceptance people to run every pitch marketing want to run, we're happy to do so as long as they pay for the people. And for some reason that doesn't happen. Working out what does need to go through the conflicts and what doesn't, and the caveats with that, that also helps having that clarity up front.
Yeah, that makes good sense. You started by talking about wanting it all but wanting it easy, really the sort of trade-off between those two things. What advice or suggestions would you give to a firm that's thinking of going on this journey or is on this journey now?
Know what you want. You can't have both ends. You can have a cat or a dog. You cannot have that because that's weird. Part of it comes down to, I think, knowing what you want and recognizing, okay, but if you want to capture the foundation information, capture it at a second point. So at BCLP, we designed a process so we ask a set of questions up front. That's the minimum I need to get going. But marketing tell me that the following questions are incredibly important, but you're not going to know them straight away. So there's a follow-on process that comes a month later. And we had to have some quite robust discussions with the board, was as a good example, where they were saying, but this is the only stick we have. That matter number is the only stick we have to make them answer questions. To which I said, that means you've lost the argument. because nobody fills in data willingly if you're using it as a stick. It just doesn't work. If you're having to force people, it means you haven't won the argument about the value of that data, and until you do, then you're not going to get anything from it. It's not going to be good enough, and you're just going to be forcing people to do it. So we linked it to, dear associate, this is coming to you. It's going to be part of your appraisals in terms of it's come to you, you need to do it. We also ran the stats at the moment on how long it takes people to fill in the form, and a partner is 4 times as fast as the secretary to fill in the form. And they get their matters opened twice as fast, because I don't have to go back so often to say, this is rubbish, try again. The associate landed somewhere in the middle. So our next build and training is going to focus on, if you want your matter back faster, get your associate to fill in the form. It works well for their development. They get to know what they're doing and a little bit more, and it will save them questions, because otherwise your secretary just becomes a post box and doesn't have the answer, or worse, thinks they do and guess. And that's not helpful.
Which plays to the data piece you were talking about there, because probably if those people are originating the data, it's probably going to be the right quality and the right detail that you need.
That's what we'd hope.
You were talking a bit about client interaction, client facing.
Yeah.
The client facing aspects of this. Just talk about that in a bit more detail, where you think that's going and what clients are expecting and asking for.
So there's some areas where Intapp and I may disagree slightly. So at BCLP, Chris Sunzel was a big fan of the lateral process. And I think it's got a lot of legs for some, but at the moment I can't get them to fill in a spreadsheet, so I'm slightly nervous about the idea of them filling in an open solution. So we need to find a way to make that as simple and easy as possible. I think it's doable, but the laterals is definitely aware that's a function that could really work, especially in the US where this is just every day. I think the next area where it would be useful is starting to see the client due diligence, especially in relation to the personal data stuff. So most of the due diligence, I don't think people will care about, but if you're asking people, send me a passport, that's tricky. And in the US, especially when we started applying some of the German requirements on identifying the person who's instructing. So in the UK, we take a sensible approach to that, which is, yeah, I'm pretty happy it's Bob is instructing, Bob appears to be a director of the company, my work here is done. In Germany, or a lot of the continent, they're very much, great, you've identified Bob, go and get Bob's passport. So when I'm having conversations of, hey, I need the GC of Facebook's passport, and our American colleagues looking at us like, are you out of your silly minds? That's really challenging. And they were turning around and saying, we advise clients, do not send personal documents by email. We cannot then go and ask these guys to email us back. So we had to come up with some solutions for that. And this feels like a way we can say, hey, dear client, here's your link to upload the documents directly. Yeah,
that's interesting. And in fact, in both those areas, we've developed templated solutions around the lateral onboarding process, where you can send a link to the lateral, they then click on the link, they then can access an external tenant, they can submit data about themselves, they can attach documents, a list of their clients, and then you can take that through a review internally and then collaborate back and forth with the lateral. And likewise, on the second one there, the client engagement, again, we've the same sort of technology, we can manage that now. So we are heading in that direction, but any requirements that we can hear from people in the room or from you is always very helpful.
We often hear OCGs are a big problem. No, they're not a real problem. Yes, they're a huge problem. Of all the firms, you've worked at BCLP, you've been at Freshies, moving to DLA. Is there a trend toward more? Is there a trend toward fewer?
The problem is everybody recognizes it's really important. Everybody recognizes they need to be tagged. There needs to be analysis. Nobody wants to do it. So it ends up with Brennan, my US counterpart, doing it on the side of a desk until you get a team of people, because it can't be a junior team. It needs to be somebody who can understand terms and tag them. And then we can do that for the conflict stuff, and it's very important. But then, as we've seen, finance have next to no people, so saying, hey, could you read this entire document and tag all the bits that are relevant to you, for some reason goes down badly. But it's definitely the growing area, and I think a growing area of complexity as well, because after you've had terms for a couple of years, that means you've got terms in there that are almost certainly out of date and need to be updated and need to be followed through. What information do you want to give back to the business? Well, we'd want them to make sure they were aware of the conflict terms. And I said, no, they don't care. That's our job. We've covered that. They want to know what the billing rules are. And better yet, I don't even want to tell them the billing rules. I want the billing rules to just work. So that's where it needs to flow seamlessly into time. which it can do. There are requirements there, that just needs to happen so that people don't accidentally break the rules. And we're linking that to the engagement letter. And we were very close to, if you don't upload an engagement letter within 2 weeks, you will no longer be able to finalise time and elites. So that was very much a direction of travel.
But it's good to see that connectivity between the different Intapp components, but also extending it out to things like time entry and putting carrots and sticks in place as well.
Terms will be increasingly important, and different types as well, because I think once you've got terms, you want to make the most of your licenses, so you want to make sure that actually I want to look at my own engagement letters, I want to look at suppliers as well. I want to be able to put everything in it.